Na ili kuweza kutafakari yale ambayo tunazungumzia leo, nitaanza kwa kuhadithia hadithi fupi. Na pia ili tuweze kuelewana, itabidi nibadilishe lugha ninayotumia na niendelee kutumia lugha ya Kimombo, yani Kizungu. And my story goes, I am the daughter of one, John Gikonyo. Or in other words, I am the daughter of Gikonyo wa Masharia. So, I am Wageshi wa Gikonyo. Growing up, Wageshi wa Gikonyo, that was the name I knew. That was the language I used to communicate with Gikonyo wa Masharia. We spoke in Kikuyu throughout. To date, I am more comfortable speaking to my parents in my mother tongue. But as fate would have it, somewhere along the way, I decided to pursue the same career as Gikonyo wa Masharia and become a lawyer, as he had many, many years ago. He's now retired. Now, the conversations that we formerly used to hold in mother tongue had to change. When we are still engaged a lot, we still do, constantly on legal matters, what is happening. Most of the time I find myself now, we are forced to discuss in English or to have a mix of the two. Kikuyu, then when we have to talk, for example, when we were talking of the Solai Dam, somewhere we had to talk of strict liability. So we switched from strict liability. As you can see clearly, we cannot, translating strict liability to mother tongue is difficult. So we have to use strict liability in the English, using the English language. That takes me, that short story takes me to the context that I want to consider today's issue. That I am a law teacher, not even a lecturer. I teach the law to students. The question is in relation to today's topic. How do I effectively use language to communicate the law to my students? And this is at two levels, by the way. The law student in class and the law student in all these wanjikus we are talking about. And as it were, by the way, wanjiku is the common term we use in Kenya to mean every woman or the lay people, the citizen. Whereas, as had been explained before, wajiko is actually somebody's name. So how do I communicate the law to these two different groups of people? How does language help me to do that? And I realize for my students, I have to speak in English to be able to communicate. Why? One, colonial legacy. I was taught law in English. That is what I know. So that is what I have to use to communicate to my students. My students themselves, that is what they understand. So I have to communicate to them in that language. Yes, is it possible to communicate in another language? Teach law, as Dr. Duncan has said. Kiswahili, yes. And I would love to use Swahili. I do love speaking Swahili, by the way. However, I'd be faced by a number of challenges. Some of the terms that have been translated into English that may be of Latin origin are their equivalents in the Swahili language. And as we have already seen from the very first speaker in this session, you'll find that most of the time, well, like when you translate English words into Swahili, there's no single direct term. So we cannot, jurisprudence, one word. But on the other hand, we have to talk of falsafa ya sheria. Falsafa meaning philosophy. So that is what it would take for me to communicate to my students. So is that vocabulary existing? We need to create that vocabulary. Would my students appreciate me speaking to them in Swahili? And would they understand? And I really doubt it. I really don't think so, because most of us, even as citizens, we think Swahili is a difficult language, we can't understand. So my students would, I'd lose them. Half of the time I'd say a word and be like, Mwalimu, umesema nini? hatuelewi. So those are some of the things that would hinder me from communicating in Swahili, even if I wished to do so. My solution to that, encourage the use of Swahili. Develop it as a language of equal importance to communicate the law. Translating the law into Swahili, it is possible, we can do it. However, there are challenges. For one, there is the cost implication. Ask South Africa. They have even a body in place to try and translate their laws. How much does it cost them to do so? The experts we do have, that is not a problem. So those are some of the challenges I would have in using the Swahili language to communicate to my students. Now, to Wanjiko. To Wanjiko being my relatives, uncles and aunts, we start from them. I would have to communicate to them in mother tongue. First, I would have to get equivalent of the words to be able to communicate to them. In addition to that, I would even have to take cognizance of the different dialects. I'm aware of my time. I would even have to take cognizance of the different dialects. For example, people may not appreciate, but let me just explain it to you. If I speak my mother tongue, somebody who originally understands would tell that I'm a Kikuyu from Nyeri. And when somebody else speaks, I'll tell you that's a Kikuyu from Murang'a, that's a Kikuyu from Kiambu. And there are certain words that are different. The Luya have similar with the different Luya dialects. So even translating the law into Kikuyu would mean I need to understand the context so that I translate it properly. Those are the challenges of using other languages to communicate the law. But that doesn't mean that they cannot be surmounted. It is possible. So in conclusion, consider, yes, drafting the law in Swahili, but foremost for me as a teacher, what I feel we can do and what I should do is to synthesize the law that is written in English, to synthesize it so that I can communicate it to Wanjiko in a language that Wanjiko understands. Asanteni.